Under the ancient sky, before time settled into the rhythm of days and seasons, there was a realm where order was not guaranteed. It was maintained. A place above the clouds where silence carried weight, and every action, no matter how small, had consequences that could reach the world below. In that realm, there existed a presence unlike any other, not merely powerful, but essential. A force so consistent that existence itself seemed to align around it. When it moved, balance followed. When it paused, even the heavens seemed to hesitate. But balance is not a permanent state. It is something that must be preserved, often against forces that do not understand restraint. And within this same elevated world, there was another presence unpredictable, restless, impossible to confine to expectation. Where order formed patterns, this force broke them. Where calm established structure, it introduced disruption. Not always out of malice, but from a nature that refused limitation. For a long time, the distance between these two forces maintained harmony. One guided stability, the other tested its limits. Together, they formed a tension that kept everything from becoming stagnant. But tension, if left unresolved, does not remain harmless forever. There came a point when what was once tolerated began to feel unbearable. Actions that were once overlooked started to accumulate weight. Boundaries that were once flexible began to harden. And slowly, what had been balanced began to shift toward fracture. What followed was not immediate destruction, but something far more dangerous: withdrawal. Because when the source of stability is pushed too far, it does not always respond with confrontation. Sometimes, it simply disappears. And when it did, the effect was not confined to a single place. It spread instantly, without resistance. Light that once defined direction no longer arrived. Shadows that had always existed began to expand unchecked. The rhythm that governed life above and below began to collapse into uncertainty. Those who remained were forced to confront a reality they had never prepared for. Guidance was no longer guaranteed. Efforts were made to restore what was lost, but every attempt revealed the same truth. Some presences cannot be commanded back into existence. They return only under conditions they define themselves. And in the silence that followed, a single question began to echo across everything that remained. What could possibly bring back what the world itself depends on? Once it is chosen to withdraw, the gods stood motionless. No one dared speak. Before them, the great cave remained sealed, and behind that stone barrier rested the one presence the world could not survive without. The darkness had lasted longer than anyone expected, long enough for fear to become certainty, long enough for hope to begin fading. Below the heavens, the consequences were becoming impossible to ignore. The forests had grown quiet. The oceans reflected only endless shadows. The warmth that once touched every corner of the earth had vanished. For the first time since creation, the world felt abandoned, and all of it traced back to a single decision. A decision made by the goddess of the sun, Amaterasu. Before darkness consumed the world, Amaterasu had been the heart of heavenly order. She was not feared because of her power. She was respected because of her wisdom. Where others ruled through strength, she ruled through balance. The heavens flourished under her presence. The rivers flowed as they should. The seasons arrived without delay. The earth below remained connected to the divine world above. Everything existed within a delicate harmony. And at the center of that harmony stood Amaterasu. But even the strongest foundations can be shaken, especially when chaos comes from within. Among the divine beings of heaven, none were more unpredictable than Susanoo, the god of storms, the ruler of violent seas, the master of thunder and destruction. Where Amaterasu brought calm, Susanoo brought unrest. Where she created, he disrupted. Many believed his strength could have made him one of heaven's greatest protectors. Instead, his anger controlled him. His emotions burned hotter than reason. And every time he lost control, the heavens suffered. At first, the gods tolerated his behavior. Then they excused it. Then they feared it, because each act of destruction became worse than the last. One day, Susanoo's rage crossed a line that could never be undone. Sacred fields were destroyed. Holy places were desecrated. The very symbols of order were reduced to chaos. The heavens watched in disbelief, but it was what happened next that shattered everything. Inside a sacred hall, divine attendants carried out their duties in peace. Then suddenly, chaos erupted. Panic spread. Fear replaced calm. The sanctity of heaven itself had been violated, and when news reached Amaterasu, something inside her changed. Not anger, not hatred, something deeper, disappointment, the kind that comes when someone you once trusted becomes unrecognizable. Amaterasu realized something terrifying. The heavens were no longer a place of balance, not while chaos remained unchecked. And so she made a choice. Without a word, without a warning, she turned away from the celestial kingdom, past the sacred halls, past the divine gardens, past the countless gods who watched her leave, until she reached a hidden cave deep within the heavenly mountains, a place untouched by the world, a place of complete isolation. Then she stepped inside and sealed the entrance behind her. The moment the stone closed, the light vanished. At first, nobody understood what had happened. Then the darkness spread across mountains, across rivers, across oceans, across every kingdom beneath the sky. Day never arrived, morning never came. The sun had disappeared. People prayed. Nothing happened. They waited. Nothing changed. The darkness remained. And with every passing day, fear grew stronger. Even the gods began to panic. Because for all their power, they had never imagined a world without Amaterasu. The heavenly realm gathered in desperation. Every god, every spirit, every divine ruler, all searching for an answer. Many proposed force. Others suggested persuasion. Neither would work. Because Amaterasu had not been imprisoned, she had chosen to leave, and no one could command her return. Then one voice offered a different solution, a strange solution, one based not on power, but on curiosity. The gods transformed the darkness outside the cave. They built fires, hung sacred jewels, placed a magnificent mirror before the entrance, and then they began to celebrate. Music echoed through the heavens, laughter filled the air, dancing replaced despair. The gathering became louder and louder. Inside the cave, Amaterasu listened, confused. The world was covered in darkness. So why were the gods celebrating? What could possibly be so joyful? The question lingered in her mind, growing stronger with every passing moment, until finally, curiosity overcame isolation. Slowly, Amaterasu approached the entrance. For the first time since sealing herself away, she looked outside. The celebration continued. The laughter echoed. Then her eyes fell upon something unusual, a brilliant figure, radiant, magnificent. Standing before the cave, Amaterasu stopped. She had never seen such beauty, and she wanted to know who it was. So she stepped closer, unaware that she was looking into a mirror. For the first time, she saw her own divine brilliance reflected back at her. And in that brief moment of distraction, the gods acted. The entrance was pulled open, light burst into the heavens, and the darkness shattered. The world awakened. Mountains emerged from shadow. Rivers sparkled once more. Forests breathed again. Warmth returned to the earth. Hope returned to humanity. The sun had come back, and with it, balance. But the events of that day were never forgotten, because the disappearance of Amaterasu revealed a truth that even the gods could not ignore. Order is often taken for granted, until it vanishes, and once lost, even the heavens themselves may struggle to bring it back. The story of Amaterasu is not merely a tale of light and darkness. It is a reminder that harmony is fragile, that chaos left unchecked can drive even the brightest forces away, and that sometimes the fate of an entire world can depend on whether hope survives long enough for the light to return.